On the night of September 14, 1999, a Boeing 757 from the United Kingdom approaches the northeastern coast of Spain. On board are hundreds of passengers beginning their vacations after a routine flight, unaware that the final minutes before landing are about to become one of the most confusing and critical sequences ever experienced at Girona Airport. It is not an emergency flight nor an exceptional situation on paper. The aircraft is in normal condition, the crew is experienced, and the destination is operational. But that night, a combination of adverse weather, reasonable operational decisions, and an unexpected event will come together at the worst possible moment. September 15th, 1999, Cardiff Airport, Wales, United Kingdom. It's 8 p.m. in Wales, and here, Britannia Airways Flight 226A is preparing to depart for Spain's Costa Brava, packed with tourists. Britannia Airways Flight 226A originates at Cardiff Airport in Wales and is bound for Girona Costa Brava Airport in the northeast of Catalonia. It's a regular route within the European charter market, widely used to transport British tourists to Mediterranean holiday destinations. Girona is a secondary airport, with less traffic volume than Barcelona, but very active in tourist flights, especially during the high season. While it does have navigation aids and instrument procedures, not all of its runways are equipped with full precision approach systems, which can increase workload under certain weather conditions. Several alternate airports are designated for this flight, including Barcelona, Reus, and Toulouse, all within a reasonable radius, though also affected that night by unstable weather conditions. The aircraft involved is a Boeing 757-200, a twin-engine medium-range jet widely used on European and short to medium transatlantic routes. It's known for its power, good performance on relatively short runways, and solid handling in demanding conditions. It's equipped with two Rolls-Royce RB211 engines. The 757 features advanced systems for its time, including autopilot, autothrottle, ground proximity warning systems, and multiple electrical and hydraulic redundancies. In 1999, Britannia Airways is one of the largest charter airlines in the United Kingdom. It mainly operates tourist flights in partnership with major tour operators, including Thomson Travel, which organized the trip for the passengers aboard Flight 226A. The airline has a large fleet of Boeing 757s and 767s and maintains operational standards in line with British and European regulations. The flight deck is occupied by two British pilots. At the controls is Captain Brendan Nolan, 57 years old, a veteran aviator with a long professional career, logging over 16,000 flight hours, much of it on the Boeing 757. He is considered an experienced pilot within the company. The first officer, 33 years old, whose name has not been released, has less total experience but holds a significant number of hours on the same aircraft model. Both pilots have recently completed CRM training and are fully qualified to operate the flight without restrictions. On board are 236 passengers, mostly British tourists taking part in a package holiday to the Costa Brava. Among them are families and children. The initial atmosphere of the flight is typical of a nighttime vacation transfer. The cabin crew consists of 7 flight attendants, strategically positioned throughout the cabin, all trained in emergency and evacuation procedures. In total, 245 people are on board the 757. Weather is the main factor influencing the operation. For hours, a series of convective storms has been affecting the northeast of the Iberian Peninsula. MEDAR and TAF reports warn of heavy rain, cumulonimbus clouds, variable wind gusts, and reduced visibility. The situation is not exceptional, but it is dynamic and changing, requiring constant monitoring and flexible decision-making. At 8:40 p.m., Wales time, Flight 226A begins its takeoff roll. It lifts off without issues and heads toward Spain. The Britannia Airways Boeing 757 pushes into the European night, leaving the British coast behind. Nothing out of the ordinary occurs during cruise. The aircraft performs flawlessly, and the cabin maintains a calm routine. But as the descent toward Girona begins, the situation starts to change. The weather radar displays well-defined convective cells to the west and southwest of the airport. The storm is active, alive, and slowly moving. The crew is aware. This isn't a desperate approach, but it's not a routine one either. Before beginning the descent, the crew openly discusses the weather and the available options. There is no explicit external pressure to land at Girona at all costs, but there is a familiar combination of factors typical of this kind of flight. Passengers, imperfect alternates, and fuel that, while sufficient, is not unlimited. A reasonable strategy is adopted. Attempt an initial approach, and if it's not feasible, reassess the situation. Every decision made up to that point falls within normal and defensive operations. As they approach the Girona 50R, the captain decides to attempt an approach to runway 02. It's a more demanding maneuver, with no ILS, but it offers an uphill runway and avoids an unfavorable wind. The captain takes control. The first officer shifts to monitoring. The aircraft encounters moderate turbulence. To increase the descent rate while keeping the airspeed under control, the captain deploys the speed brake. The problem is that, amid communications, checklists, and turbulence, it remains extended longer than expected. The aircraft needs more thrust to maintain speed, and fuel consumption starts to exceed expectations. Mid-maneuver, a gust violently shakes the cockpit. The approach chart, clipped to the captain's yoke, comes loose and falls to the floor. Recovering it at that moment is impossible. From that point on, the captain depends on the first officer to read the chart information aloud. The workload increases. The storm intensifies. Visibility drops, the wind shifts, and then comes a key piece of information from the tower. The storm is now directly over the airport. Fuel levels are dropping quickly into a range that no longer allows for mistakes. The captain knows it clearly. If this approach doesn't work, they'll have to go around and divert. At minimums, the captain sees lights, but he's not in a proper position, nor does he have enough stability to continue. There's no hesitation. He adds thrust and initiates the go-around. The aircraft climbs away from the ground as the crew mentally reorganizes the situation. During the go-around, the cockpit atmosphere changes. It's no longer just about the weather. Fuel is now a psychological factor. It's not yet an emergency, but the margin is tightening. The captain requests weather information from Barcelona. Conditions there are better. Still, they decide to attempt a second approach at Girona, this time using the ILS for runway 20, confirmed by ATC. There's no full new briefing, not out of negligence, but due to operational inertia and time pressure. Both pilots know the procedure, but mentally, they're no longer in the same place they were at the start of the descent. The aircraft re-enters the storm. Shortly after, the FMC issues a clear, cold message: insufficient fuel. It doesn't mean the aircraft will run out of fuel immediately, but it does mean that if they divert, they'll arrive at the alternate below company fuel minimums. The message isn't discussed between the pilots, but it hangs in the cockpit. The aircraft captures the localizer for runway 20. The crew agrees on roles. The captain will look for visual references. The first officer will focus solely on the instruments. The weather radar is turned off to avoid distractions. The aircraft is configured with flap 30. Everything appears under control. At around 1,000 feet, the captain calls out, "Lights in sight." At around 500 feet, he confirms visual contact with the runway. The rain is heavy, visibility limited, but acceptable. The aircraft stays on glide path. At 250 feet, the captain disconnects the autopilot and autothrottle. At that moment, the system is correcting a wind variation with a slight increase in thrust. The aircraft begins to climb slightly above the ILS glide path. The first officer notices immediately and calls it, "We're high." The captain pushes forward on the controls to correct. It's a brief, instinctive action. And then it happens. In the middle of the storm, a lightning strike causes a total electrical power loss at the airport. Within seconds, all airport lights go out. Runway edge, approach lights, PAPI, everything disappears. The captain looks ahead and sees nothing. Where the runway was, there is now only darkness. The rain diffuses what little is left from the landing lights. The visual reference vanishes just seconds from touchdown. For a few critical moments, the captain is in shock. There's no time to analyze, only to react. The aircraft enters an excessive rate of descent. The cockpit fills with alerts. The radio altimeter calls out 10 feet above the ground. Thrust levers are brought to idle. There's no margin left. The 757 slams into the runway with extreme force. The nose gear strikes first, almost simultaneously with the main gear. The impact reaches over 3G. The aircraft bounces, the nose lifts, and inertia throws the captain forward. Unintentionally, he pushes the controls again. A second later, the aircraft crashes back down. This time, the impact is devastating. The nose gear collapses backward, tearing out its support structure, which violently penetrates the main equipment bay. At that moment, the aircraft loses nearly all electrical power. Critical systems fail. Auto brake, anti-skid, spoilers, reversers. The cockpit goes dark, lit only by emergency lights. The first officer announces that the auto brake isn't working. The captain brakes manually. The aircraft continues to slide at high speed, without aerodynamic or electronic aids. It veers, first to one side, then the other, and leaves the runway after traveling over a kilometer. Off the tarmac, the aircraft crosses rough terrain, a slope, trees, and a perimeter fence. It breaks apart in several places. Both engines detach. The fuselage splits. Finally, the 757 comes to a stop in a field, several meters below runway level. In the cockpit, the captain is unconscious for a few moments. The first officer, disoriented by the darkness and uneven floor, manages to initiate evacuation procedures. In the passenger cabin, the flight attendants act quickly. There is no fire. Passengers begin exiting into the rain in the middle of the night, unaware of where they are. 18 minutes later, emergency services finally locate the aircraft. 44 people are injured, one of whom will die days later from the injuries sustained. What happened? Was the crew responsible for this accident? The investigation into the accident of Flight 226A was led by the Civil Aviation Accident and Incident Investigation Commission, with participation from representatives of the United Kingdom, the United States, the aircraft manufacturer, and the airline. From the outset, it was clear that this was not the result of a single error, but rather a complex chain of technical, human, and environmental factors. Analysis of the flight recorders allowed investigators to precisely reconstruct the final seconds of the landing. The data confirmed an initially stabilized approach that rapidly deteriorated after the disconnection of the autopilot and autothrottle, followed by an aggressive nose-down correction coinciding with the sudden loss of all external visual references. A key element of the investigation was the airport lighting system blackout. It was confirmed that, due to the storm, the external power supply failed for approximately 11 seconds, causing a simultaneous loss of runway lights, approach lights, and PAPI. Although emergency generators activated, they did so too late for Flight 226A. The The investigation determined that the initial impact exceeded the landing gear's certification limits. The second, even more violent impact led to the collapse of the nose gear, whose support structure was driven into the main electronics bay. This intrusion caused catastrophic damage to the aircraft's electrical system, explaining the immediate loss of several critical deceleration systems. No prior mechanical issues or maintenance deficiencies were found on the aircraft. There were also no signs of medical incapacitation or deliberate procedural violations. The human factors analysis highlighted cognitive overload, surprise, and spatial disorientation experienced by the captain in the final moments. The CIAIAC concluded that the accident was the result of an unstabilized approach in severe weather, decisively worsened by the sudden loss of visual references due to the airport blackout, triggering a chain of impacts and structural failures that could no longer be recovered. The Boeing 757, registration G-BYAG, was damaged beyond economic repair. The fuselage suffered near-complete fractures in two sections, the engines detached, and the landing gear was completely destroyed. The aircraft was declared a total loss and later scrapped. In terms of human impact, there were no immediate fatalities. However, one passenger who had initially been discharged later died from undetected internal injuries. 2 others sustained serious injuries, and over 40 passengers suffered minor injuries. The performance of the cabin crew was crucial. Despite the darkness, rain, and structural damage, the evacuation was completed quickly and without mass panic. The absence of fire played a decisive role in the survival of the occupants. Emergency services were delayed in locating the aircraft due to lack of communication and extremely poor visibility, a factor that was also reviewed after the event. The crash of Flight 226A prompted thorough revisions of several operational protocols. Criteria for stabilized approaches were reinforced, especially for nighttime operations in poor weather conditions. Emphasis was placed on the mandatory go-around in case of any significant loss of visual references below minimums. Power supply systems at airports were also reviewed, emphasizing the importance of ensuring immediate transitions to emergency generators during storm conditions, especially at airports with frequent nighttime operations. In the area of training, the accident became a case study in surprise factor, stress management, and decision-making under extreme pressure, highlighting that even experienced crews can be overwhelmed by sudden and unexpected events. "11 seconds without lights may seem insignificant, until they occur just as an aircraft is descending below 100 feet, at night, in heavy rain. In that moment, technology, experience, and procedures give way to the most human factor of all: surprise. This accident reminds us that aviation is not just engineering and checklists. It's also about perception, anticipation, and margin. And when that margin suddenly disappears, even the best professionals are faced with impossible decisions. Britannia Airways Flight 226A didn't end in greater tragedy, thanks to a combination of fortunate factors: the structural resilience of the aircraft, the absence of fire, and the decisive actions of the cabin crew.